So I won't read the first half of this. I'll just, maybe to set this up, if you haven't read the second one, and many of you haven't, as you've read the first, you know that Angus McClintock, the 60-something mechanical engineering professor who's immigrated from Scotland and still has his brogue with him, who's got hair that looks like he does it every morning by sticking his head inside a screaming jet engine. He's got a beard where if he were ever stranded on a desert island, he could safely nourish himself for weeks on end with what is remaining in his beard from previous meals. He doesn't really care much about what people think of him, yet he does have an honesty and an honor and an ethics about him that I think many of us are looking for. So he has the chance, he has to make a decision. Is he going to run again in this election? And much to Daniel's surprise, he thinks he is going to run again. He decides to run again, but this time on purpose. So Daniel has to stay with him. So this is a little piece early after Angus has announced he's running and the writ has dropped and the campaign is on. Did I do that? Let's see. The look on the hair and makeup woman's face was priceless as she first laid eyes on her next subject, or more accurately, her next project. Perhaps even her life's work. Angus and I had just arrived for a taping of CBC's flagship public affairs program, Face to Face. As Angus settled in the chair facing the light bulb bordered mirror, Sally, as her name tag revealed, stood behind him and just shook her head. "Time to break out the heavy artillery," she said before disappearing out the door. Sorry, one more setup thing. The Tory candidate is rumored to be Emerson the Flamethrower Fox. Emerson Fox is a backroom Tory boy who really created the negative campaign, the scorched earth attack ad way of campaigning. He's come out of the back rooms and is likely to face Angus as the Tory candidate. Sorry, I should have set that up before. Angus looked at himself in the mirror. Sorry, Sally clearly hasn't worked on anyone lately with quite your sense of style, I ventured. Angus looked at himself in the mirror and tried in vain to quiet the riot roiling on his head. "I canna help it, my hair has always been a wee bit mutinous." Sally returned, rolling a cart with an array of tubes, jars, and aerosol cans, some of them still wearing their Home Depot price tags. That wasn't a good sign. Sally had slipped into a green smock and was pulling on rubber gloves when a younger woman, similarly smocked, arrived on the scene drying her hands on a towel. She too donned rubber gloves. They faced Angus and me with their hands held up in front of them like surgeons before operating. "I'm Sally, and this is Rebecca. We're in tough this morning, so she'll be assisting me every step of the way," Sally intoned. "Are you fixing to give me a heart transplant?" Angus inquired. "I wish it were as simple as a heart transplant, but our first priority this morning is to tame your hair so that we can actually get it all into the shot without having to rent an IMAX camera. And we have exactly 13 minutes. Battle stations." Sally turned to Rebecca and nodded her head in my direction. Rebecca immediately grabbed my elbow and ushered me out of the room. "I'm sorry, Mr. Addison, but unless you're a family member, you won't be able to stay for this. I assure you, Professor McClintock will be just fine, but it's best if you wait in the green room." I sat down on the couch and watched the TV monitor on the wall as the clock ticked to the top of the hour. In the meantime, Sally and Rebecca sprang into action and did their thing, and they did it very, very well. Despite what I imagine were howls of protest from Angus, they worked a miracle on his unruly cranial shrubbery. On the monitor, the show opened as usual with the host, Brett Palmer, sitting across a sort of counter from his guest. It took me a minute or so to recognize Angus. He still resembled Angus, but he somehow seemed smaller. His hair was quite neatly sculpted with what actually looked like a part demarcating the eastern hemisphere of his head. Whatever had been applied to his hair shone under the lights. His usually scraggly beard appeared to have been combed out in a Robertson Davies kind of style. "Welcome to Face to Face. I'm Brett Palmer, and I'm pleased to be joined today by Maverick Liberal MP Angus McClintock. Thanks for coming in today, Professor McClintock." "I'm happy to be here, but you can just call me Angus. Everyone else does." "What made you decide to jump into the race and run for re-election when you really had no intention of winning the first time around?" "Well, 'tis a fair question. You're right. Sitting and serving in the House of Commons was the furthest thought from my mind last October, even though my name was on the ballot. But my unexpected stint on Parliament Hill was a revelation to me. I enjoyed it. I felt as though I were making a contribution. I was surprised that I felt fulfilled. And strange as it sounds, I was unhappy at the prospect of surrendering my seat to another, when I was feeling as if I were just getting started. Angus's hair still looked pristine. Sally joined me in the green room to watch the interview and fidget. So you're confident you can win re-election despite the very strong Tory tradition in the riding, Brett probed. Balderdash. It would be the height of arrogance for me to be confident about a Liberal winning this seat again. To be clear, I wasn't elected on my own merits the last time around. A flash of fate put me in the House. This time I'd like to win the seat in the more traditional fashion, by persuading the voters of Cumberland Prescott that I'm worthy of their support over all the others. I expect it to be a very tough fight, whomever the Conservatives put forward. The first signs were imperceptible to me, but Sally picked up on them right away. Left temple at the midpoint of his ear. We've got a bulge. Oh, damn, we've got a bulge. In 10 years, I've never had a stage 4 shellac failure, but there it is. And she was right. If you look closely, you could see asymmetry emerging in Angus's hair. We were only 2 minutes in. Beads of sweat appeared on Sally's upper lip. How would you feel if you were to face Emerson the Flamethrower Fox in the campaign, as is rumored? Asked Brett. I'm less concerned with the candidate I might be facing than I am with the many challenges Canada is already facing as this recession takes hold. But I have been encouraged to read Mr. Fox's memoir, and it's quite enlightening, declared Angus. Right bulge now, hissed Sally. It's only a matter of time at this point. They better cut to commercial soon. Of course, she was right again. Angus's hair was starting to lose its sleek and sculpted look, and now had more of a Bozo the Clown vibe to it. But according to Sally, it was a very dynamic situation, and it would get worse before it got better. Aren't you a little daunted by the prospect of being in the flamethrower's crosshairs, given his reputation for politically dismembering his opponents? I don't intend to play that game. The voters deserve to hear about the issues this country must confront. I really don't think they're interested in a campaign driven by personal attacks. We want them to vote, not turn away from democracy. I'll have no part in a negative campaign, regardless of what my opponent might have in mind. And if he does try to appeal to our baser instincts, I'll be doing my level best to stay on the high road, however much I may want to punch out his lights. Back in the green room, Sally was about to climb the walls. The 2 side bulges on Angus's head had burst into a full rebellion. It was as if every hair Sally and Rebecca had carefully flattened was now struggling with considerable success to stand straight out and break free from his head. It looked, well, bizarre and otherworldly. And there were no Hollywood special effects. This was 100% all-natural Angus. Sally and I both saw them at the same time. Uh-oh, Sally whispered. What are those things? I asked, squinting to identify the blondish streaks that suddenly appeared on both sides of Angus's head. Toothpicks, Sally sighed. Most people just carry them in their pockets, I observed. How did they get in his hair? Well, we needed a little, well, or rather a lot, of structural reinforcement to get his hair to comply. Those toothpicks were holding the bulk of his mop flat. It's a new technique recently developed in a small coif college in Romania. The procedure is still being perfected. Oh, so you mean the toothpicks aren't supposed to pop out and stand up like that? I asked. Sally said nothing. By this time, Angus's beard seemed to be moving all on its own, as the fine, comb-straight lines began to vibrate and curl. What's that? I pointed to the screen again. Oh, damn, I thought we'd got them all, Sally breathed. This is heading south in a hurry. It almost looks like a kernel of corn, I said, squinting at the pale yellow nub in the lower left quadrant of Angus's beard. Yep, that beard is thicker than a Brazilian rainforest. For all we know, the cob could still be in there somewhere. Clearly, the producer in the control room was no longer transfixed by the slow-motion transformation of Angus's hedge. I saw Brett's right index finger zip to his temple as if to prevent his earphone from flying out. Brett looked down, listening. Angus, we're going to take a quick break now, Brett said before turning to face the camera. So stay with us and we'll be right back with Liberal MP Angus McClintock. I opened my mouth to say something to Sally, but she had bolted for the studio like a cheetah on a gazelle. I imagined her attacking Angus's hair and beard as an anxious producer counted down the commercial break. The monitor in the green room was not an inside feed, but the standard cable output, so I waited for the annoying Pizza Pockets ad to end before Brett eventually materialized before me once again. The camera shot had changed. I could no longer see Angus when Brett was posing his questions. Sally was probably still working on him. Welcome back to Face to Face. I'm Brett Palmer, and I'm pleased to have Renegade MP Angus McClintock with me in the studio today. Sally's emergency intervention during the commercial break must not have saved the patient because the camera shot of Angus had also changed. Throughout his thoughtful response to Brett's next question, the TV screen was filled entirely with the face of Angus McClintock. We saw a bit of his hair, but the frame of the shot prevented the viewer from witnessing the real action taking place an inch or two off Angus's head. This particular camera shot was perfect for a remote dermatological examination, but didn't make for great TV. Angus delivered what I thought was a powerful answer. Unfortunately, the extreme close-up was more likely to prompt viewers to count his nostril hairs than focus on his compelling words. It sure made for strange TV. 10 minutes later, we were headed back to Cumberland with Angus at the wheel of his Toyota Camry. Well, beyond the histrionics of that possessed makeup artist, I thought that went rather well, he opened. As a participant, Angus had obviously heard the show, but clearly he had not seen it. Absolutely. It was a great interview, Angus. Strong answers, and you looked good. I could have done without those women wrestling with my locks every 5 minutes. Oh, no, you couldn't, I wanted to say. They were just doing their job. I glanced over and noticed a stray toothpick resting on his right shoulder. I brushed it off and casually shoved it down the crack in the seat. A few minutes later, Angus was rifling through his beard as if searching for his house key. He found what he was looking for, lowered his window, and tossed out a corn kernel.